You are listening to the Beyond Believing podcast. I am your host, Katie Ann. I am a certified life coach, a divorced mom to 5 amazing children, and I am here to share some love and encouragement with you about healing and moving on post-divorce as a Christian woman. Stick around after the show for some details on how we can work together. You are listening to the Beyond Believing podcast, episode number 29. Okay, my beautiful friends, welcome to the next episode in our series, what I'm calling Lessons from the Father. This week, I am talking all about love. I feel like this may be a little presumptuous of me, but I just had so many things on my mind about this the last couple of weeks, and I have just put it off for so long. I feel like I just gotta get it out now. So we're talking all about love this week and what I have learned about love from God since my journey post-divorce and coming to know Him in a biblical perspective. I will say this has been a really amazing learning experience. God has shown me and taught me about Him and what His love truly looks like and feels like in a way that is really hard to put into words. And if you've ever been on this journey and you understand what I'm talking about, you know what I mean. It's just so beautiful what God does in our lives to show us and teach us things that He wants us to learn when we're really open and willing to be taught. It is amazing what He will do for us. So I wanted to share this little series, these lessons from the Father, because I am just continually in awe of who God is and what He has to show us and how much love He has for us. Like, I am just overwhelmed, honestly, at times with how much He loves me and how pure and precious that love really is. And I just really felt like I needed to share this because I know I have always had this notion, an idea of what love was. And I am coming to learn and understand not only was all of those preconceived ideas I had, everything I've learned about love off base, but in this process, God has shown me, I think, how precious I am to Him. And I have always had this idea, I guess, that some man was going to complete me. And maybe you felt that way, or not necessarily complete me, but I think that's what the world wants us to believe. I really think we are inundated with these false notions and ideas of what love is, these grandiose fairy tale romances and all-consuming relationships, someone who just can't get enough of you. Like I have mentioned before that while I'm at work, they're always playing songs on the radio. So many of them are about love. And I used to really believe or want somebody else to share these kind of songs with me about these beautiful love relationships and feelings and things. And not that that's a bad thing. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't want any of those things. But I do want to caution that I no longer believe that's the kind of love that God is trying to teach us about. And I will say that for a minute, I went from this idea of having like these fairy tale romances and these beautiful happily ever after experiences from realizing that I was living in a happily ever after that did not feel so happily ever after. And so then I went to like the opposite end of that spectrum into like love is maybe punishing, or not maybe a punishing, so to speak, but unrealistic notion, and even very critical of people who say they have a good, healthy relationships, that perhaps they're just false. And I've shared this before, but I went to believing like that was all fake and that nobody really had a healthy godly relationship. And so perhaps God has been teaching me this lesson because I've genuinely been looking for understanding about what his love really means and what a godly man really looks like and what it means to be a godly wife. So perhaps he's been showing me those things because that's kind of been in the back of my mind. Like, what's this really all about? Because I'm kind of feeling like I don't understand. So if you've caught yourself there, I know that I see so many reels about dating post-divorce and finding love again post-divorce. And I've shared a few as well, comical or not. Like it is a little bit of a mind bend and adjustment moving from a marriage to then dating again and having these like temporary relationships and testing out the waters. It's a really odd season and very interesting, especially as like a 40-year-old person. You're no longer like in your 20s. It's not high school. And yet in some ways it still feels that way. And you're like, I think I missed something here. But I wanted to share about this because I think it's really important for us to understand that there are godly men out there. I do see them in beautiful relationships with their wives and men adoring and respecting the women who stand by them. And I've had this understanding quite a long time, most of my life, that if you want to have a specific kind of relationship and husband, you need to portray the qualities and characteristics that type of man wants to be yoked with. And so in my quest for this, I've been kind of learning some of these things. So what I'm sharing this week is maybe perhaps some of the shedding of the worldly ideas of what love means and putting on maybe some God lenses and seeing from his perspective what he's trying to teach us about. And as I've come to learn, I guess, about this, what has always been in the back of my mind is the idea that Christ is the bridegroom and the church is the bride, and that husbands are to love their wives like Christ loves the church. And so I was just had this question in the back of my mind. So how does Christ love the church? how as the bridegroom is Christ loving the bride? I've really had some beautiful awarenesses. So I'm sharing these with you today in hopes that something might resonate with you and something might be able to speak to you in your quest post-divorce in this journey you're on, and allow God to really just love on you and let him be your husband in this season. One of the very best dear friends that I've been blessed with in this post-divorce season and on my journey into knowing Christ and the Bible and understanding it, as a dear sweet friend who prays for me and who has prayed for me to understand and accept that Christ is my husband in this season. And that has been really powerful for me. So one of the things I want to do here is, if you don't have someone praying for you, I decided I'm going to start a little prayer list. And so if you don't have someone praying for you, or you want someone praying for you, or another person praying for you, just send me a private message titled prayer request, and I will send you a personal prayer. And I am not going to promise that I have anything prophetic or amazing or earth-shattering to share with you, but I do have a genuine heart to pray for you and pray over you and to share the love of God with you. And so that's just one thing that I want to start doing. So please send me a little message. The link to my Instagram is in my show notes. And I just would love to know more about your story and how I can help you on your journey the way my sweet friend has helped me on mine. So here we go, friends. One of the classes I took last session as I went back to school. So if you didn't know, I went back to school. And I decided I was going to finish my bachelor's degree, which I have never finished in over 20 years. And I am studying biblical theology and business and leadership. And so my biblical theology classes are my very favorite because I'm learning all kinds of things about the Bible that I haven't ever known before. And one of the things I learned in my class last session was the Hebrew names of God. And this is just mind-blowing to me. And one of the reasons I'm like, I need to learn Hebrew because they also have different words for love. And we limit in the English language some of these things by only having one word for them. So we're going to talk about a couple of the different forms of love, but we're also going to talk about the name of God in these sessions, these lessons from the Father, these different names of God in Hebrew. And this session, I want to utilize the name El Roy. In Hebrew means the God who sees me. A couple episodes ago, I shared about the story of Hagar after she and Ishmael had been cast out from Abraham and Sarai, and how she was basically had become the first single mom in the Bible. Well, before she became the first single mom, Sarai had also really severely mistreated her as soon as she found out she was pregnant, right? She was jealous and took her jealousy out on Hagar after she'd given Hagar to Abraham to have a baby with, right? To produce posterity with and fulfill this God-given promise of this beautiful posterity that she was not being fruitful in producing. And so Hagar, of course, fled, which can you imagine poor Hagar? Like, she's already the servant, gets taken in as a wife, conceives, does exactly what Sarai had asked her to do and wanted her to do. And then as soon as that did, she was mad and jealous with her and cast her aside. And then she has this baby, and Sarai finally, Sarai becomes Sarah, and she finally becomes pregnant. She conceives and then casts Hagar out again. She's like, out again. You're on your own. But in this first section, Hagar is cast out, and of course she's weeping and crying, and the Lord has compassion on her, and an angel comes to her and tries to comfort her, right? And he does comfort her, and he tells her to go back, and he, lets her know that these promises that God has given to Abraham and Sarai are going to be hers as well through Ishmael, and he promises her that, she's going to have a son and bear this posterity. And it says in Genesis 16:13, so she, Hagar, called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "You are a God of seeing." For she said, "Truly here I have seen him who looks after me." And truly this is the God who sees me, is what this Hebrew word is trying to tell us about Hagar and her little experience, that she understands that God is with her and is watching over her and knows her situation, basically. And I know that we all have our own preconceived idea of what love is, but I think what one of the most powerful lessons God has taught me is what his love is really like I mentioned before. And as I was thinking through, what is it not and what is it really? What I really have come to believe right now, love is like slow and steady and consistent and patient and honest. And as I was coming, you could just wrap this all up in maturity. Maturity is the word, like emotional maturity, spiritual maturity, physical maturity, mental maturity, mature. It's not self-consuming or self-serving. It doesn't ask you to just accept what you have right now to offer. It doesn't just seek to receive. It's not looking just for its own personal gain. And it's not just the words we speak. It's action, consistent action and consistent behaviors that show respect and honor to each other as God's children, acknowledging that you are a child of God. You are the imago Dei. You have the image of God in you in some way, and so do I. And as such, we just treat each other as such, right? We treat each other like we are his creations, because we are. What I've learned to understand again is that I was chasing after the world's idea and definition of love. And this, my friends, is always going to leave you empty and looking for more. It's going to leave you empty and looking for more because it just is not sufficient. And everyone has their own idea of what love is. And so you have to constantly be changing and adjusting and altering to fit into somebody else's definition of love, which you cannot ever do, because what we're doing in that quest is internally, this is like a life coaching skill. Here's what we're doing is trying to ask somebody else to fill a need we cannot even fill ourselves, or we can't articulate ourselves. And it's something that only God can heal and fill. And so when you're trying to seek after this notion that somebody's going to complete or fix or fill you, it's just not going to happen because they're incapable, because they are not God. They don't understand. They cannot perceive. I mean, you can give effort, you can do genuine work, but you also have to receive genuine effort and receive and be able to recognize when someone is genuinely invested and mature enough to show up and to give without the intention of receiving in return. And this is really what I think 1 John 4 is trying to teach us about love. He says we love him because he first loved us. We don't fit God into what we believe love is. We allow God to teach us what love is. I'm actually listening to this beautiful book right now called The Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer. And he said something really beautiful about God and love. He said, we don't define the love of God. God defines the love for us. Everything else is artificial from our own understanding, regardless, outside of him. And we eventually wear out and fall out when we're working from this space of trying to create and fit somebody into a mold that we have written, and vice versa. And if you've ever been in a relationship where it feels like you're both trying to struggle to communicate or express or receive love together, it's because you're missing that connection and that understanding from God's definition of love and feeling it. And he has this beautiful ability to give you the capacity to love from his abundance of the love he has for you. In this, right now, I just finished up my second session of classes, and one of the books I had to read was called Courageous Faith. It was Everyday Heroes of the Old Testament. And he was telling us about, or giving a narrative about John, this 1 John chapter. And he says, in this section, John drives his point home concerning why love is so characteristic of those who have fellowship with God. He explains that love is the nature of God. Therefore, everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. The one who doesn't love as he ought does not know God. Oh, isn't that just like a little bit prickly? They're like, just get you. Like, if you don't love as you ought to, you do not know God. Like, that will make you stop and think right here, right? And then in 1 John 4, verses 7 and 8, he says, Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. And in this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. In this is love, that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. This is just a little bit mind-blowing for me. And I will tell you, this is actually 1 John chapter 4 has been one of my favorite scriptures or chapters most of my life. Just something about this chapter and how it teaches us about love has just always spoken to me. I understand it from a completely different standpoint now. I understand this is trying to tell us that there isn't anything we're going to teach God. We don't get to say, like, God loves us, so he's going to accept X, Y, or Z. He doesn't have exceptions to his character or to his attributes or to his laws or to his nature. He has just him. Like, he is. That is why he said in the Old Testament to Moses, I am. It just is. When we try to fit God into our definition of love is where we get a little awry. But if you will allow God to teach you what His love truly is, instead of trying to tell Him what you believe love is, this, friends, is just a beautiful lesson I promise He's got for you. And again, thinking about Christ as that bridegroom and the church or His people being the bride, this season of being His bride has made me then ponder, what kind of a bride am I being? And I was thinking about, as I've been reading over my Bible in a year over, of course, you go through Genesis and Exodus and all that, and I've read through the Israelites and them going through and how He speaks so harshly to them about how they've, sinned against Him and created fornication against Him. I was just thinking of like all the ways that I have in my past believed I was really truly following God and not actually at the same time. So as I've been having this question, like, what kind of a bride am I being? How loyal am I? And thinking about that scripture that Christ says, greater love hath no man than this, that He laid down His life for His friend. I just thought, I don't know if I have truly loved on that level. Like I have my children and I love them and I would do anything for them. And I do, and I would lay down my life for them. But I think I don't feel like I ever felt that kind of love for my ex-husband or any other relationship I've ever had. I have realized that, and I'll explain on this in another minute here really quickly, that I've understood that I thought sacrifice and looking for validation was love, looking for the attention. I realized I was looking for attention. And I'll come back to, I'll explain all this in a minute here. But that's not what Christ is really teaching us. And that's not really the kind of bride He's asking us to be. I saw this reel by a pastor named Erwin McManus. He has a book out right now called The Seven Frequencies or something like that. I believe it's called The Seven Frequencies of Communication. And he just does he's just very eloquent and very calm and wise. But he was sharing that you don't fall into real love. He says you fall into like addiction and obsessions, but you don't really fall into real love. You have to work into it. And you have to learn to make room in your life for another human. And he goes, it's actually a sacrifice. And this is what I mean by what I've learned about defaulting to a sacrifice was I learned that I just was defaulting to sacrificing myself, believing I was showing love, when all I was really doing was giving up myself in an effort to win the approval and love in the form of like attention and validation from somebody else. And I've learned that doesn't equal love. And quite honestly, the attention I was receiving and getting wasn't honoring, respectful, or beneficial to myself or the other person. And so that's not really love. I was like, okay, so that's not really it. I got that wrong. Okay, so what is it really? As I was reading in Matthew, where Peter walks on the water out to Christ, and then he realizes what he's doing and he starts to sink, and he cries out, Lord, help, Lord, save me. Christ says to him this really beautiful thing. He says, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? I was thinking of this as like how I think of my little kids when they were learning how to walk, that it's this just beautiful like trust and confidence in their ability that they can't see. Like they're hesitant to let go, and they're hesitant to, wander off on their own. And you're like, I know you can do this. And you're right there standing up for them and cheering for them. And I just felt like that was kind of like the loving little nudge that Christ gave to Peter. And before, I'd always kind of seen it as like this rebuke. And this time when I read it, it just felt like such a loving little encouragement as I would encourage and love my sweet little infants as they're learning how to take their first steps. Like Christ is like, I know you can do this, and you know this, you can do this, And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about Christ and His sacrifice, and that I'm still researching this. I'm still learning about this, but I'm looking into this more as I don't know that He ever referred to His crucifixion as a sacrifice on His part. Like it was something He was giving up His life, and it wasn't ever like a begrudging attitude that he had about it. Like, I haven't researched this thoroughly, so I could be completely off base here. So don't quote me on that. But as I was thinking about it, I just kept thinking about how he so willingly gave his life because he knew that was what was required of him. And because he has so much love for God and for us and his purpose. He was so firm and understood his purpose and calling in life that he just willingly wanted to do what was required, and that his sacrifice, his self-sacrifice is made possible and is the model that we can follow. And this comes from this textbook I had to read. It's called the Illustrated Bible Survey. And he says, true love is not that we love God, but that he first loved us and sent us his son, as John 4 teaches us. And then John tells us what he's told everyone up to that point, what he's told all of his disciples about what it means to love and abide with God, who they've never seen. And he says, wraps it up in these principles. God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. We love because he first loved us and sent his son. Love for one another is evidence of abiding with God. His love is perfected in us. God's Spirit is evidence that God abides in us. And whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God abides in him. Whoever claims to love God must love their brother also. And then he said this, and I think this is so beautiful. Looking back at this, he says, the way someone treats others is a window to their soul. So you know the love and capacity another person has for God and their understanding of God's love for them by the way they treat others. You can see exactly where someone is on their walk with God by the way they talk about and treat other people. And our words do matter. I was reading this last week, the parable of the two sons in Matthew 21. They are a reflection of our heart and who it belongs to. Doing and saying has to match up in your lives. And it is a reflection, again, of your love and understanding of God and his love for you by the things that you do and the things that you say, and if they match each other or not. So in this parable, it's in Matthew 21, verses 28 through 31. So it's the story of the two sons, and it's a man calls out to his sons and asks him to come and help him in the house. Okay. So a man has two sons. He tells the first son, hey, go out and work in the vineyard today. And this first son says, no, I'm not going to do that. But later he changes his mind and he goes ahead and goes out. Then he goes to his second son later and he says the same thing. And his son goes, yes, I'm going to go. But he never goes. And then Christ asks his disciples, which of the two did well of his father? And they said the first. And Jesus said to them, truly I say to you, the tax collectors and prostitutes go into the kingdom of God before you. And then this is verse 32. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believe him. And even when you saw it, you did not afterward change your minds and believe him. So Nikki Gumbel says in this, on day 21, God is far more concerned about your heart than your lips. And again, this is the love of God. Your words and actions match or they don't. It is worse to commit to somebody or to say you're going to do something and never do it, knowing you're never going to do it. It's not honest, right? You're not being honest with yourself or with somebody else. But to say, honestly, no, I'm not going to go do that, and then realize, hey, that's not the right thing. I'm going to go ahead and go do it. That's what Christ is talking about here. And that's what I think is a reflection of our hearts and whether or not God is living in us. And you can see that in the behavior of the relationships of those people around you. It is your character at the end of the day. And God's words and his actions always match. A.W. Tozer also writes, we are only right. Okay, I'm going to just preface this by saying I was in a relationship with a man who was very concerned with being right. And it was very important to him that he was right. And this stood out to me, this quote from A.W. Tozer, because I think we all have this innate desire to be right. We want to be on the right side of things. And so I'm not saying this man was wrong for wanting to say that, but the intention is we ourselves are not right. What he says, A.W. Tozer says, we are only right when we stand in position with God. So true love then is God-given, God-inspired, and God-led. And we can only be right about the kind of love that we are giving and receiving when we stand in position with God on how He defines love for us. And I could go on and on about a list of what love is and isn't, but I think you get the point that deep down, after going through these things and what you've already been through, you know what love is and is not. And if the relationships you've experienced before, you can tell whether or not they've matched up here. And I'm not going to pretend that there is some perfect relationship. I am not going to try to extend that perception to you because I don't think that's reality. I do, however, believe that when our hearts are right with God, when we are standing in position with God, and when we're allowing God to teach us and show us where we're falling short, when we have that emotional maturity, spiritual maturity, physical and mental maturity to be willing to be wrong to God, then He will show us and teach us. And that is evident in our lives. If you haven't experienced that yet, I would encourage you to really bring that to God and allow Him to show you what it is that His love truly means, because it is the type to follow. It is the standard to bear. And I say this truly and genuinely. I do believe that that love is possible. And I think that this season I am learning to be at peace with allowing God to be my husband and be alone. What I am learning is that while I do believe there is a possibility for a beautiful, God-centered relationship in my future, right now, in this moment, I struggle to believe that there's anything sweeter than what I have with God. And that is really precious to me. And I do believe it's possible for everyone to have. And I really believe that that's what God wants us to have and to seek out and to enjoy, and what He wants to have with us. I will say that there's no desire to lose that connection. And what I have thought about recently is like, now that that desire has changed, I see myself from a very different perspective on the level of the kind of person I would like to be yoked with. And I understand that person sees me and will see me the way God sees me. I'm going to be sharing in another episode about this, so I'm going to save it for what that means. But it is a beautiful lesson I think God is teaching and has taught me, and I really believe it's possible for you too. So with that, my beautiful friends, I'm going to leave you at the end of this episode. But again, if you do not have someone praying for you to help you allow God to be your husband in this season post-divorce, please let me do that with you and for you. Send me a message or email me, prayer request, and let me know where you're at and what you would like for me to pray for you about. And I would be honored to do so, my friends. Have a beautiful day. You have been listening to the Beyond Believing podcast. If you have enjoyed or benefited from anything you heard today, please take just a moment of your time and leave me a 5-star review wherever you're listening. This helps me to get my content out to you and keep it free. I love to help women and I love to share this message, and I want to be able to keep sharing it with you. So that would help me immensely. And if you love this episode, you're going to love working with me in my coaching program, Selah. Get all the details at the link in my show notes. I'm here to help you rebuild your future and write your post-divorce story. This is going to be the best season yet.